Chapter 201. Ethan had no choice when everyone was looking at him. He looked at Olivia and said, "I have no plans of canceling my engagement with Marina." Marina swallowed nervously. She quickly looked at Ethan and asked, "Ethan, does that mean that you pick me?" Ethan nodded. It was like a huge stone had been lifted off Marina's chest. She ran to Ethan excitedly and wrapped her hands around his arm. "I knew you loved me, Ethan. Dad, Grandpa, did you hear that?" The anger on Otto's face subsided. "You better mean what you say. I'll be counting on you to take care of my daughter from now on." Chris patted Ethan on the shoulder. Olivia had expected this outcome. But even if she had known, she still felt a freezing chill in her heart when she heard it. She pulled her hand away from Ethan and said, "I respect your decision, Ethan." Ethan watched as she left. He had no choice since Otto was there. Chloe thought about it for a while. Then, she went after Olivia. Olivia straightened her back as she left. She was like a lone wolf dragging her hurt body to a secluded area to heal. "Liv," Chloe caught up to Olivia. "I want to talk with you." Olivia looked at Chloe, who was panting. She knew this woman better than she ever did after today. She decided that she would not hold any unrealistic expectations of this woman anymore. "Don't worry, Mrs. Carlton. I will not bother your son-in-law again," Olivia said coldly. Chloe blocked her way and said, "Liv, give me 5 minutes. Just give me 5 minutes." Olivia looked at her coldly. "You've already achieved your goal. The person you need to watch is Ethan, not me. If there's nothing else, I'll be going." "Liv." Olivia tasted blood in her throat again. She frowned and pushed Chloe aside. She quickened her steps to get away from her. Chloe called out to her from behind her, then she fainted. Olivia turned back and saw that. She instinctively wanted to go check on her. It would seem like she wasn't lying about her heart condition. She noticed that Chris had come after Chloe. So she turned and left quickly. She then went to a deserted corner and began to throw up blood. Olivia leaned against a tree before slowly sliding down. She wiped the blood on the corner of her mouth with her hand and laughed at herself. She was such a failure. Throughout her life, she hadn't been able to keep anyone by her side. Her family and her lover all went to Marina's side instead. The thought of that made her chest hurt so much she almost couldn't breathe. Then, she knelt on the ground with a hand holding onto a branch. She kept throwing up blood. She looked at the puddle of blood. Her first thought was that it was lucky that she didn't embarrass herself before the Carltons. She hadn't eaten anything. Her stomach felt like it was burning up after she threw up several times. It was unfortunate that she forgot to bring her medication with her. She had been in a rush. She curled up into a ball under the tree. Her consciousness began to fade. She wanted to call for an ambulance on her phone. She didn't want to die. She couldn't die today. Her eyesight was getting fuzzy, and her fingers were trembling. She slowly inputted the numbers into the phone. She only needed to tap on the dial button. But she lost consciousness before it could happen. Darkness consumed her. She fell onto the ground with a thud. In the last flashes of her consciousness, she thought she saw Ethan driving away in a car. She could also hear footsteps. A person came before her and sighed. The person then crouched down and lifted Olivia up. Chapter 202. Olivia thought she was a goner. She had begun to recover after the chemotherapy, even if it left her body weak at first. Maybe it was because she was in a better mood when she was on the island. She felt like she was slowly getting better and had not vomited blood in a while. She didn't know if it was because she got emotional. But she had never vomited so much blood before. It was like red was all she saw. She fainted despite her best efforts to stay conscious. When she opened her eyes again, she immediately smelled disinfectant. She noticed the walls around her were white. Her stomach seemed to be better. It didn't hurt as much. "Olivia, you're awake. Are you feeling better?" A familiar male voice came from beside her. She looked toward the voice. It was Colin, whom she met on the cruise ship. His eyes were filled with concern. Olivia had just regained consciousness. She said weakly, "Did you save me?" "That's right. I saw you on the side of the road as I was heading out. You had blood all over you. I was scared to death." Colin scratched his head and said with an embarrassed expression, I'm sorry, Olivia. I wanted to apologize to you for what happened on the ship. But I couldn't reach your phone. It's okay. I understand. It was just an accident. Olivia looked at the needle in her arm. Half of the liquid was still in the IV bag. That's right. Is Mr. Fordham doing well? I've just returned from overseas. I wanted to visit him, but I didn't want to intrude. Olivia's eyes darkened at the mention of Jeff. He isn't doing too good. He hasn't regained consciousness yet. I appreciate the sentiment. Visitation is not allowed yet. I understand. You have to stay strong, Olivia. Everything will be better. Colin consoled Olivia. He then asked, Are you sick? I saw a lot of blood on your clothes, but I didn't see any wounds. Olivia smiled weakly and said, I'm fine. I accidentally bumped my nose and had a nosebleed earlier. Did it look scary? Colin patted himself on the chest and said, The bloody stains were scary. But I'm relieved that you're okay. Don't worry. Of course, I'm okay. Olivia reached for her phone on the nightstand. She realized that it had shut down. She knew she shouldn't have said those words at the Carltons today. She knew she crossed the line with Ethan. Olivia understood that she shouldn't provoke him. She risked disrupting her own plans by doing that. But she was just too angry. She wasn't able to hold it in. She knew that Ethan probably wouldn't let her off this time. Colin handed her a power bank and said, Olivia, you need to stay the night for observation. You must be hungry after sleeping for so long. I'll go buy you something to eat. Olivia nodded and said, Thanks. No need to thank me. Colin smiled brightly. He walked out the door with brisk steps. A nurse came in to help her remove the needle in her hand. She said with an envious look, Miss, your boyfriend is so good to you. He had been taking care of you the whole time you were out. I've never seen a more caring man than him. Olivia was taken aback. She explained with a smile, He's not my boyfriend. He's my younger brother. I'm sorry. I was mistaken. The nurse stuck her tongue out and removed the needle gently. Miss, your brother has booked a few medical examinations for you. It's getting late. The examinations will be scheduled for tomorrow. Rest well tonight, and no food or drinks after 10 p.m. There's no need. I've already done medical examinations before. It's just a nosebleed today. I only fainted because I have been pretty frail. Okay, but I still recommend that you do some in-depth examinations. After all, many things can cause a nosebleed. Your results from before might not reflect your current health. Some conditions can worsen pretty rapidly. Thanks. I'll think about it. Olivia got off the bed and freshened up a bit. She saw that Colin hadn't returned yet. She went to the corridor and wanted to pay for her hospital bills. She ran into Chloe when she stepped out of her room. She was also wearing patient attire. Chapter 203. The first thought Olivia had when she saw Chloe was that they were fated to meet each other. But only as strangers. As she turned to leave, Chloe caught up to her and said, Just give me a moment, Liv. I have something I need to tell you. Olivia didn't stop. In fact, she sped up. Chloe ran after her. Then, Olivia only stopped when she heard a nurse say anxiously, Mrs. Carlton, slow down. Your heart can't take much more of this. Olivia stopped in her tracks when she heard that. Chloe finally managed to grab her hand. She said while panting, Please, just give me a moment, Liv. Chloe looked pale and weak without makeup on. Even her lips were slightly bluish. Mrs. Carlton, I thought there was nothing left to say between us. 5 minutes, Liv, give me 5 minutes. Please, Chloe begged. The nurse standing next to them said, Mrs. Carlton has a heart condition, miss. Please do not agitate her anymore. Olivia was put on the spot. She couldn't walk away now. All right, 5 minutes. She walked into her room. Chloe followed behind her. They each sat on a corner of the couch. Chloe moved next to Olivia and took her hand. Olivia struggled for a bit. She then gave up because she didn't want to risk agitating Chloe. Seems like Chris isn't treating you that well. You had good health when you were with Dad. Olivia deduced that Chloe developed a heart condition due to mental stress. There were only 2 other ways she could have gotten a heart condition. One was that she was born with it. The other was unhealthy habits. Neither of those could have been the case for Chloe. Chloe shook her head and said, "Chris is good to me. Really, really good to me." Chloe didn't want to make Olivia feel uncomfortable. She quickly changed the subject. "I left you when you were young. But there were some things that your father probably hasn't told you. Don't you want to know why I left him, Liv?" Olivia's other hand grasped the couch tightly. "Wasn't it because you fell for another man? Let me tell you a story, Liv." Chloe's story wasn't mind-blowing. It was more melodramatic. Chloe and Chris had known each other since they were kids. The Carltons were a family of soldiers. Chris was also obligated to join the army. He began to take part in covert missions when he was a teenager. He promised Chloe that he would be back to marry her once the situation got better. But news of him dying on the battlefield was spread. Chloe was heartbroken. The Parker family promised her to Jeff. Jeff gave her 3 years to forget about Chris. And so, Jeff waited. Chloe could not betray his kindness. She got married to him under the pressure of her family. But she had only ever loved Chris. It was the same, be it 3 years or 7 years. Chris was the love of her life. But just as she was prepared to accept her life as it was, she heard the news about Chris. He was saved by someone when he was hurt. But he had temporarily lost his memory. He married the woman who took care of him after his injuries healed. By the time Chloe heard the news, Chris already had a child of school age. That was a blemish on their love. It was something that Chloe couldn't get over. Even after she also had a child of her own, she was still hung up about the past. She couldn't forget about the feelings she had. These years, she had been neglecting everything around her. That was why she developed a heart condition. Chris' wife later died in an accident. He also recovered his memory. Chloe didn't want to have any regrets. So, she went to him without considering any consequences. Olivia laughed so hard that tears came to her eyes. "Am I supposed to clap for your epic story of undying love?" Olivia had misunderstood. She thought Chloe felt guilty after seeing her bleed. She finally realized. This middle-aged woman had all the love she wanted since she was young. Her life was all smooth sailing. Everyone around her doted on her. And she had only experienced hardships in her love life. That was why she was still living in her own world at this age. That was why she came to talk about how hard her life had been. "Mrs. Carlton, can't you live without Chris Carlton?" Chapter 204. Chloe was crying as she told her story. She described the missed opportunities and misunderstandings between her and Chris as incredibly sad and painful. She didn't know how to react when she heard what Olivia said. There were still tears in her eyes. She looked comical as she tried to keep the tears from falling. It was as if she was wondering why Olivia didn't feel any compassion for her. She had such a sad life. She began to wonder if Olivia was truly heartless. "Mrs. Carlton, losing Chris might have been the worst thing that ever happened to you. But do you know what it means to have a family destroyed? Do you know how helpless I felt when my family left me one by one? Do you know how much pain I felt when I went from being a princess to a nobody that anyone could spit on?" Olivia smirked and said, "In your world, a mosquito sting requires medical attention. How would you ever understand how I feel? I have to try my best just to stay alive." Olivia was envious of her mother. Chloe was the kind of person who only lived for herself. Nothing was more important than her feelings. Not even Chris, who had always loved her. Not even her own daughter, who had been chasing after her and begging for the smallest bit of attention. All these can be sacrificed for the sake of her pursuit of love. Chloe didn't understand what Olivia was thinking. She thought Olivia would understand her after knowing her story. She didn't expect her to be so emotionless. Chloe felt defeated, but she remembered that Olivia had always obeyed her as a child, so she had one last option. "Liv, I know you have suffered these years. I wasn't with you then. But now I'm back. I'll never let anyone hurt you again." Olivia met Chloe's gaze. She hesitated slightly for an instant when she saw the sincerity in her eyes. But Chloe then said, "I've been there since Marina was a child. She is a very outstanding woman. I think she suits Ethan well. Can you please listen to me and let her have Ethan?" Olivia was dumbfounded, but Chloe had more to say. Chloe noticed that Olivia was silent. She continued, "It's not that I love her more. The thing is, you're already divorced from Ethan. If you continue to cling to him, your reputation will be ruined. Another thing is, the two of them already had a child together. Can you not break them up for Connor's sake?" Olivia had always had this feeling that she was adopted when she was younger. She started to feel like that again. She wondered how Chloe was able to utter those words. She claimed not to love Marina more. Yet, every word she said was in Marina's interest. Olivia looked at her and said with amusement, "Have you ever thought about this? Marina is the third wheel in this relationship. And Ethan is the one clinging on to me, not the other way around. I'll be thankful if you can convince him to stay away." Chloe was taken aback. Her brows began to furrow. She had a look of disbelief. "Liv, I know you might have a big misunderstanding with me. But please do not take your anger out on Marina." Olivia was shocked. Chloe had suddenly knelt down while she was talking. Tears flowed from Chloe's eyes. She said in a sad tone, "I'll use the rest of my life to make up for the sufferings I caused you. My only request is that you let Marina off the hook. Please just let her and Ethan be." Olivia's condition had stabilized, but she felt her blood boil when she heard Chloe's words. She began to see red. There were so many things wrong with what Chloe said. But Olivia couldn't form any words in her mouth. She was so angry her entire body was shaking. The door opened with a bang. A group of people were standing at the door. Chapter 205. The Carltons were standing at the door. They were furious when they saw what was going on in the room. Chris was especially angry. He quickly approached Olivia and Chloe. He was relatively gentle to Olivia before. But now, he was staring daggers at her. "What are you doing, honey?" Chris said in a serious tone as he helped Chloe up. Before Olivia could say anything, Chris said harshly, "Miss Fordham, no matter what prejudices you might have against her, she is your mother, after all. She had been thinking of you all these years. The worry she felt caused her to be unwell. She also has a pre-existing heart condition. Why do you keep agitating her? Will you only be happy after you've killed her? Please stop, honey." Chloe attempted to defend Olivia. Chris patted her on her hand and said with an intense expression, "Miss Fordham, believe it or not, I do feel bad for you. I truly want to treat you like my own daughter. I want to allow Chloe to carry out her duties as a mother. But I now know why Ethan wanted to divorce you." Olivia's stomach was feeling better when she woke up. But after hearing what these two had said, she was so angry she couldn't speak. The pain in her abdomen began to spread to her entire body. It hurt so much that her brows were furrowed tightly. She mustered all her strength to squeeze the words from between her teeth. "Why? Because a woman like you doesn't deserve any kindness. Look at your mother. She almost died giving birth to you. Not only are you not repaying her gift of life to you, but you also treat her badly. Are you not worried that karma might get back at you?" Olivia swallowed the blood in her mouth and glared at Chris. "Are you finished? If you're finished, get out of here." She didn't want to say another word. Talking with people like them was a waste of time. She wasn't one of theirs. She was at fault no matter what she did. Olivia was in a lot of pain. She just wanted to rest. She had no energy to argue. But the Carltons were offended, especially Marina. She finally had a chance to vent her frustration. Ethan wasn't here. The Fordhams weren't here. Olivia was all alone. Marina began to take her anger out on Olivia. She shoved Olivia to the ground hard. "Olivia, how shameless are you? You are already divorced from Ethan. Stop clinging to him." Olivia was in so much pain that she was covered in sweat. She bit her lip. She was so weak she couldn't speak. Chloe saw that something was wrong with her. She leaned over and tried to help her up. "Liv, what's wrong? Why are you so pale?" The heart-wrenching pain in her stomach consumed her. Cold sweat covered her body. She tried to respond defiantly. But she realized she was too weak from the pain to speak. Marina pulled Chloe's hand away from Olivia and said, "Mom, didn't you say she loved to pretend? I didn't even push her that hard, but she fell. I think she's pretending again." Chloe recalled the time Olivia pretended to be sick when she was young. She looked hesitant. Marina said with a cold expression, "Stop pretending, Olivia. No one here cares if you're in pain. Olivia was in so much pain that she was losing consciousness. She could faintly feel that Marina had kicked her twice on the leg. The heel of Marina's shoe hit a joint on her leg. It made the pain worse. Chapter 206. Marina was exacting her revenge on Olivia. She could never forget the time when Olivia pinned her down and hit her. She wasn't blind. She could see that Olivia wasn't feeling well. But she was taking this chance to attack Olivia because she couldn't fight back. She kicked Olivia as hard as she could while Olivia couldn't stand up. She wanted to vent her anger. Stop kicking her, Marina. Chloe reached out and tried to stop Marina. Marina didn't usually care about what Chloe had to say. But she didn't mind at the moment. Mom, didn't you say she loves to pretend? She deserves to be kicked. As she was speaking, she kicked Olivia a few more times. She even slapped Olivia in the face. You bitch, stop pretending. Olivia wanted to argue, but she couldn't speak. She could only feel her consciousness fading slowly. She could feel something picking her up in her daze. She could feel someone talking. But she couldn't hear what was said. She murmured, "Home, I want to go home." A man's voice said next to her ear, "All right, I'll bring you home." She was then put on the person's back. Her head slumped weakly onto his shoulder, and he carried her away with steady steps. For some reason, Olivia suddenly recalled something that happened to her as a kid. She was pushed over by some bullies. The children were throwing pebbles and mud at her. "You're a motherless bastard. Your mother is shameless." I heard she ran away with another man. She retaliated in anger. She fought with the bullies. But she was beaten until she had no strength left. She was hurt all over. Jeff found her later. She held his hand and said while crying, "They called me a motherless bastard." Jeff smiled gently and patted her head lightly. "Silly girl, you have me. But, I miss Mom. Although your mother is in another country, and you are very far apart, she misses you too." A glimmer of delight flashed on her face. But the glimmer quickly dimmed. Why did she leave me if she misses me? Jeff crouched down before her and said gently, "Olivia, everyone has a right to pursue their own happiness. Your mother finally found her happiness. Even if she isn't here, it doesn't mean she doesn't love you. What about you, Dad? Will you leave me one day like Mother did?" Olivia asked while she tugged at his sleeve. Her expression was filled with worry. She had already lost her mother. She didn't want to lose her father too. Jeff knew what she was thinking immediately. "No, I will never leave you." Olivia broke into a smile. Jeff crouched down and carried her on his back. "Don't worry, Liv, I will always be with you." She laid on her father's broad back with a faint smile. "Dad, if you ever find your own happiness, I'll also give you my blessing." "Silly girl, you're my happiness." Ethan saw a sweet smile appear on Olivia's lips while she was unconscious. It was the first time he saw such an innocent expression on her in a long time. Olivia held his hand tightly and yelled, "Don't go. Don't go." Ethan said softly, "Okay, I won't go." The next instant, Olivia opened her eyes and jumped into his arms. She said with a nasal voice, "Dad." Ethan was rendered speechless. Chapter 207. Olivia's eyes slowly came into focus. She saw a white shirt. She looked up and saw Ethan's strong jawline. The hope was gone from her eyes. She remembered that Jeff was still unconscious in the hospital. There was no way he could have been here. "Why did your nose bleed?" Olivia couldn't believe that was Ethan's first question. She could smell the scent of an unfamiliar shower gel on him. She recalled the fact that he slept in the same bed as Marina last night. She quickly moved away from his embrace. "I hit my nose. My mother accidentally hit the wound when she slapped me," Olivia said calmly. Ethan stared at her face. He wanted to find hints of her lying. Olivia looked at him adamantly and said, "What? You don't believe me? Weren't you the one that said I was in good health and that nothing could be wrong with me?" "That's true," Ethan agreed. It wasn't clear if he was trying to convince himself or Olivia. He didn't notice the fleeting smirk that crossed Olivia's lips. He did look at her latest medical examination report. There were no issues with her health. Olivia noticed that she wasn't in the Miller residence. It was the seaside apartment that she had lived in before. It would seem like her confrontation bore some fruit. Now that the Carltons were pressuring Ethan, he didn't dare to openly live with her again. Since you're fine, you can start work tomorrow. The HR department is done with the preparations. Okay, Olivia replied calmly. I'm fine now. You can head back now. Don't let the Carltons misunderstand. Her words angered Ethan. The anger on his face became more apparent. He said coldly, "Is that what you want?" Olivia replied quietly, "Yes. I do not want to be the third wheel between you and someone else. I've done foolish things in the past. I don't want to be a fool anymore." Ethan shot her an icy glare and said, "I hope you don't regret your decision today." He stood up and left resolutely. Olivia's voice came from behind him. "I hope you don't take your anger out on other people, Ethan. I can promise you that I will be yours until the day I die. It won't change even if we're not together anymore." Her words brought some warmth to his eyes. He stopped in his tracks and said, "Remember your words today." Olivia sighed in relief when the door closed. She looked at her phone. Colin had sent her some pictures of food. He tagged it with a sheepish emoji. Olivia tapped on the voice message button and said, "I'm sorry, Colin. I had to leave. Something came up. Thank you for today. How much is the hospital bill? I'll transfer it to you." Colin replied almost instantly, "You don't have to be a stranger to me. If you want to repay me, just take me out for lunch." The young man's voice was clear. The trailing tones carried a lively and uplifting emotion. "Okay, I'll treat you to lunch someday. Thanks for taking care of Snowball." The conversation ended after he sent a few more emojis. Olivia took out the other phone hidden in her purse. She dialed Jack's number. "Are there any new developments?" Jack replied quickly, "Not much since it's only been a short while. But I discovered something interesting." "What is it?" Dr. Galloway and Ryan graduated from the same school. They were even famed lovers back when they were in school. "I knew it. They knew each other." Olivia remembered that the nurse said a tall man had visited her father. Ryan was a tall man. Maybe he was the one who caused Jeff to go into a coma. That's right. I also found out that the companies that Ryan had registered were all shell companies. There is no real meaning for their existence. Olivia understood now that Ryan appeared before her to introduce her to Lee. He wanted her to know the truth. He tried to use the truth to create a rift between Ethan and her. This means that if we find Ryan, we get closer to the person behind it all. That's true. I've also uncovered some leads about Belle. I'll be leaving Aldenvine tonight. You can try and meet up with Ryan when I come back. I'll help you capture him. Okay. Thanks, Jack. No need. Remember, wait for me to return. Don't alert the enemy. Chapter 208. In the next morning, Kelvin was waiting for Olivia downstairs. Olivia had put on some light makeup to appear livelier. Brent was waiting in front of the car when they arrived at the company. He said politely, "Mrs. Miller." Olivia shook her head and said, "I told you. Don't address me as. I'm sorry. I got used to it. I have something to tell you about your job. Mr. Miller has moved you to the sales department." Olivia frowned and said, "Didn't he agree to make me his secretary?" Brent looked at her awkwardly. He coughed softly and said, "Mr. Miller took into consideration that you want to improve yourself. There are more hands-on challenges in the sales department than if you were his secretary. Mr. Miller has your best interest at heart." Olivia understood. Ethan couldn't possibly keep her by his side as a secretary. He wouldn't be able to answer to the Carltons for that. She understood that this was the outcome of her action at the Carlton residence. But she realized that she wasn't used to him staying away from her now that it actually happened. It was fine either way. No matter which department she was in, those who wanted to harm her would still come sooner or later. "All right. Thanks for the help." "You're welcome. I've already notified the HR department. You just need to head up and go through the procedures." Brent only accompanied Olivia to the elevator. He had to avoid being seen with her to not raise any suspicions. Olivia wanted to join the company to investigate suspicious individuals around Ethan. She didn't expect to be moved to the sales department before she could begin her investigation. She held her head and sighed. She would have to make do with what she had. She went to report to the HR department. The person who processed her sized her up several times. Olivia knew what she was thinking immediately. All right, your desk is over there, Olivia. You can go and get settled down. The HR employee was still pretty courteous. Thanks. Olivia looked at her employee ID, and her thoughts wandered. Her first job in life was not as a doctor but as a salesperson. She could hear people chattering when she walked in. She must be someone special. Mr. Ingram handed her file to HR personally. But I'm curious. She's a top medical student. Why would she become a salesperson? She could probably get a job in any of the best hospitals in the country. Who knows? Maybe she likes a challenge. The bonuses of some of our sales department colleagues are several times higher than the salary of a doctor. Because of Brent's influence, Olivia might not have an office to herself. But she had a desk in the best location. The sunlight came in through the window and shone on her desk. There was also a tiny potted plant on it. Olivia stretched her body leisurely in the sunlight. There were 3 teams in the sales department. She was in Team C. Sophia Linden, the leader of the team, introduced Olivia to the team. Everyone was very busy, so the introductions were brief. They quickly went back to work after. Olivia was still feeling lost after a while. She went to ask Sophia for advice. Miss Linden, I'm new, so I'm not too familiar with the job. What should I be doing? Oh, right, Olivia. I forgot to tell you that the sales department is also called the Hell Department. We have a very strict evaluation system. An evaluation is conducted every 3 months. The worst of the team gets demoted to Team C. If the same team gets ranked C more than twice in a row, a team member will be let go. Then someone new will join. Olivia heard about how intense the workplace could be. Does that mean if we're still Team C by the end of this month, someone will be let go? Sophia patted her on the shoulder and said, "That's right. And you're new here, so the person getting fired," Olivia understood, "is probably going to be me, right? Do your best. This is the project we're trying to get done right now." Sophia gave her a bunch of documents and quickly went back to her desk. Meanwhile, at the CEO's office, Ethan was rubbing his temples. He asked with his eyes closed, "How is she doing?" "She's already started working." Brent paused for a moment and asked, "Mrs. Miller doesn't need to work for money. Is there a need to send her to the Hell Department?" He found it harder and harder to understand what Ethan was thinking. Ethan opened his eyes and played with the pen before him. He said in a lazy tone, "She'll only know who to seek help from after she experiences some hardships." Chapter 209. It was thanks to the Carltons that Olivia was finally free from Ethan's control. Although they were still in the same company, a lowly salesperson like her couldn't possibly meet the CEO. The only inconvenience was that she got removed from the secretary's office. She was distanced from the secretaries, and that strayed her from the goal she came here for. Olivia could only put her hopes on Jack. She hoped that he could dig up something useful on his trip. As she was lost in her thoughts, someone said with a sigh, "Why do I have to be the one to hand in the strategy chart again?" Olivia turned and met the eyes of Norma Talbot, the person whose desk was next to hers. She was an earnest person. "What's wrong, Miss Talbot?" Norma pushed her hair behind her ear and said sheepishly, "It's time to hand in this project's strategy chart. As you know, we're already the C team. We were ranked last in the previous month. I don't dare to walk into the secretary's office. I'll be scared to death if I meet Mr. Ingram. Is Mr. Ingram very intimidating? You're new, so you don't know. If Mr. Miller is the king of hell, Mr. Ingram is the guardian of hell. He was so stern that he scared the cleaner's daughter to tears last time." Olivia nodded thoughtfully and said, "If that's the case, I'll go for you. I'm new here anyway. I don't mind being scolded." "You're too kind, Olivia. Thank you so much." Norma quickly handed the file to Olivia. Olivia looked at the file in her hand. She smiled. This was her chance to get closer to the secretaries. Unbeknownst to her, the colleagues who were all smiling a moment ago changed their expressions. "I envy how naive young people are these days. Another one who doesn't know her place. How many have there been this year?" Norma crossed her arms and said disdainfully, That's the only way to get closer to Mr. Miller. She probably hopes to catch his attention by being around there. Why else would anyone go to the secretary's office and risk being scolded? Tisk, if I recall correctly, the last one had her arm broken by Mr. Ingram and thrown out, right? Let's make a bet. How many days will she last before she quits? I'll take that action. Loser buys everyone lunch. Take what action? Olivia went to the top floor. She glanced at the door at the end of the corridor. It was shut tightly. She subconsciously sighed in relief and went into the secretary's office. The secretaries who were busy with work looked at her when she entered. Nancy winked at her and said, I heard you transferred to the sales department, Miss Fordham. Was it because you didn't like us? Olivia smiled and said, Of course not. I thought I wasn't capable enough for this position. I didn't want to cause trouble for Mr. Miller. So, I transferred to the sales department to work on myself. What a pity. You were a sight for sore eyes. You were gone too soon. Nancy was no slouch. She knew that Olivia was special. Olivia was the only person who ever brought food for Ethan. One moment, she was a secretary. Next, she was a salesperson. It must have been someone's orders. How else could she just change jobs so easily? That was why she didn't mind getting closer to Olivia. Olivia, surely, you're not here to chat. How can we help? Miss Giles, this is our team's strategy chart. Can you please hand it to Mr. Ingram for me? Nancy thought about it for a while and quickly understood. Leave it to me. Be careful in the sales department. The people there are all very cunning. Thanks, Miss Giles. Olivia took out the presents that she had prepared. For the men, she had tie clips. For the women, she prepared brooches. I thought I would be here, so I had prepared presents. Please, take one, Miss Giles. I love thoughtful people like you. Nancy toyed with the brooch and said, Thanks. Olivia proceeded to hand the presents to the others. They knew she was somehow related to Ethan, so they didn't dare to refuse. Olivia stopped before Grace. She noticed that Grace had been working the whole time she was there. She didn't even spare a look at her. Chapter 210. Grace didn't react even when Olivia placed the present on her table. Miss Angle, this is for you. Grace raised her head and adjusted her glasses. She said sternly, Did you join the company to do pointless things like this? Olivia, don't mind her. That's just how she is. You don't have to give her a present if she doesn't want it. Nancy winked at Olivia and said, Don't worry, I'll hand over the strategy chart to Mr. Ingram personally. Okay, thanks. I'll not disturb you guys anymore. Olivia stole a glance at Grace. Grace had gotten back to work. It was as if she only cared about working. Grace and Nancy were polar opposites. Olivia wondered which one of them was the suspicious one. Olivia believed that the spy could not hide forever. The truth would definitely come out. Even if she didn't make a move, the spy might not be able to remain in the dark. She had embedded tracking devices into the brooches. So, she was one step ahead of the spy this time. Olivia was deep in thought. She didn't think that there would be anyone walking around on the top floor. She walked right into another person. A familiar voice came above her head. You're an adult, right? Why aren't you watching where you're going? Olivia quickly moved away from him. She thought Ethan was in his office. She didn't expect him to sneak out. I'm sorry, Mr. Miller. I'll be going now. She almost didn't even look in Ethan's direction. She lowered her head, apologized, and scuttled away. She was afraid that Ethan might ask her to stay. Olivia quickly got to the elevator. As the doors opened, Brent and Kelvin came out of the elevator. Olivia suddenly thought about how Norma described Brent as the guardian of hell. She instantly had the image of the two of them as hellish soldiers. She thought the look suited them. She covered a smile as she entered the elevator. Ethan saw that smile. He hadn't contacted Olivia for the past 2 days. And she stayed away, too. It was as if she was trying to sever ties completely. He noticed her coming up from the security cameras and was waiting in the corridor for an unexpected encounter. It angered him to see her smile when she saw Brent and Kelvin. She ran away like she saw a ghost when she ran into him. Ethan said with a dark expression, Find out why she was up here. Yes, Mr. Miller. Brent had the answer very quickly. He handed Ethan the strategy chart. Ethan took a glance at it and dropped it. What kind of trash is this? Get me the person in charge. The file fell onto the table with a loud bang. The sound caused the cleaner who was wiping the shelves to jump in surprise. Everyone stopped talking after Olivia went back to Team C. Norma smiled brightly and said, "Thank you so much, Olivia." "No problem, it wasn't that hard." After a while, Sophia came storming out. Who handed in the strategy chart? Before Olivia could speak, Norma realized something was wrong and immediately shifted the blame. She said, it was Olivia. She insisted on going to the secretary's office to show her face. "What's wrong, Miss Linden?" Sophia glared at Olivia and said, "What did you say to Mr. Miller? Why is he so angry? Now he wants to question me."